Hi everyone. So this is the start to our next unit. So I thought it would be a really good idea to talk more about viruses. And this actually fits in really well since we've just talked about DNA and RNA. And it will allow us to talk about some current events and give you some information about the coronavirus specifically. All right, so this slideshow, we're going to talk mostly about the biology of viruses. So we're going to talk about what are viruses, okay, and then specifically what are coronaviruses, and then we'll get to, towards the end, what is COVID-19, okay, so a little bit of current events. All right, so first of all, what are viruses? So you've probably heard this term a lot, and I've just listed a few of the ones that are in the news, right? I think it was the last couple years we've had Ebola outbreaks in various parts of Africa, the Zika outbreak, which was a mosquito-borne virus, H5N1, which is a type of flu, dengue, HIV, and there's many more. So the common flu, common cold, those are all examples of viruses, okay? And viruses are basically microscopic infectious particles. So these, notice, are not living cells. You may remember back in the beginning of the year, we talked about all those things that define a living thing. So cells have that whole list of characteristics that we talked about. Viruses do not possess all of those things. They do not maintain homeostasis. They don't grow and develop. So they're very limited. But two things they have that are very important is they have genetic information, all right, and they can evolve. And they use that genetic information, allows them to reproduce, but only within a host cell. So on their own, they cannot reproduce. All right, as we said, so viruses are basically very simple. They're just a small piece of genetic material that's wrapped in a protein coat. All right, that genetic material can be either DNA or RNA, and we'll talk about both of those situations. Some viruses also have an envelope, so this would surround the genetic material and the protein coat, and that's a lipid layer. So it's very like the cell membranes, and in fact, it comes from the cell membranes of the host cell. So an enveloped virus then has this additional lipid layer, and embedded within that lipid layer can be a variety of proteins. All right, viruses use their genetic material to make the cells of the organisms. So that's what we refer to as the host. So they make the cells of the organisms they infect do their work for them. Okay, so viruses need host cells to do anything. So in this way, they're kind of like the ultimate parasites. Okay, they have one mission, and that's to replicate their DNA, and they need their host cells to do that. All right, so here is just a brief diagram showing an enveloped virus. So we have the viral genome. So remember, this could be DNA or RNA. It's embedded in this protein capsid. All right, and then surrounding the whole thing is this envelope, which is a lipid layer, and embedded in that envelope are proteins, okay? So that's just the basics of what's in a virus, all right? And so what viruses do is they invade cells, they release their genetic material, so they release the DNA or the RNA, and then they use the host machinery, okay? So what is it in the host cell that makes DNA, RNA, and protein? Think about that. All right, so it's going to use all the host machinery to make copies of itself. And then as it multiplies, they either bud off of the cell, or sometimes they multiply so tremendously that they just cause the cell to burst open, which is obviously not a good thing and causes some of the problems that viruses create. Okay, so viruses are defined by a couple different things, a few different things. So the shape, so they all have different shapes that can be classified. What they infect, so what species they infect, what types of cells they infect, how that infection happens. And then what type of genetic material do they have? Do they have DNA or RNA? All right, and you can see over here on the right is just some examples. So here's a bacteriophage. These always look the most like sort of alien invaders. These are actually viruses that use bacteria as their host. And they literally, this is like a little injection machine, and they inject the DNA in. Here's a tobacco mosaic virus. So this is a virus that infects plant cells, in particular tobacco plants. And then down here is the influenza virus, which obviously infects us. All right, and here are just some examples of different shapes. So you might see helical, polyhedral, spherical, more complex. So this is like that bacteriophage. So those are some common shapes. All right, and here again, we just have our cartoon. So this is an enveloped virus, and there are some viruses that are what we call naked form. So it literally is just the genome, so the DNA or RNA, surrounded by this protein capsid. Okay, but most of the viruses we're going to talk about are these enveloped forms. All right, so here's an example of a DNA virus. So a DNA virus has DNA as its genetic material. So this is kind of what we are used to. So an example of this is a herpes virus. So these can cause a variety of diseases, from cold sores is one example of something that can be caused by herpes virus. So it injects, so you can see this envelope basically fuses with the cell membrane, and that allows the DNA then to enter the cell. So this is the viral DNA. And then it uses this host machinery that's in the nucleus to make new viral DNAs. So it replicates the DNA, right? It also transcribes that DNA to make messenger RNA. The messenger RNA is translated to make the viral proteins. And then all of this is put back together. So you have the replicated DNA, you have the proteins that make up this protein coat. And then you can see as it sort of buds off the cell, it pulls this viral envelope around it with these viral proteins embedded. And that's kind of the life cycle of a DNA virus. Okay, an RNA virus is sometimes called a retrovirus. So this is kind of different than what we've been learning. We've been learning the flow of information goes from DNA to RNA to protein. All right, in this case, you have a virus, instead of DNA, it's RNA. So what it does is the RNA enters the cell, and then it uses an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. So it's like transcription in reverse. So it goes from RNA to DNA. And in fact, that DNA then can be inserted sometimes into the host genome. So this is an example using HIV infection. All right. So then if it's inserted into the host genome, every time this is copied, it copies the viral DNA. And then this viral DNA can be transcribed and translated, so it can make new viral parts. And then just like we saw before, the viruses assemble and burst from the host cell. Okay? So the RNA viruses just have this extra step where they have to go from RNA back to DNA, so that they can go to RNA and proteins again. Did you follow that? Okay, so I have it listed up here so you can kind of see. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what viruses are and some of the common types. So what is a coronavirus? So corona may be familiar to you, like the corona of the sun. So it basically means like something that looks like a crown, okay? So that's where it gets its name. It's a pretty common, there's a lot of different types of coronaviruses. And these types infect, there are types that infect animals and people. Okay. And the coronaviruses are known to be zoonotic. So what this means is that every once in a while, a coronavirus that infects, let's say, a bat, may develop a mutation that allows it to then infect people. And so sometimes you'll see these coronaviruses sort of come out of the blue because they've been transferred from an animal host, and then they now can be transferred by people. All right. As I said, there are different kinds. So even within the types that infect humans, Some cause colds or other mild respiratory illnesses. And then there are a few others that we know of that cause more serious diseases. All right. So as I said, they're named for their crown-like spikes on their surface. So they're round with these embedded proteins that look kind of like spikes on a crown. These are RNA viruses. And the first human coronaviruses were identified in the mid-1960s. All right. And as I said, there's about 4 types that are common human ones, and most of these just cause mild symptoms. But there are a few other coronaviruses that cause more serious illnesses. So you may have heard of MERS. So this is the coronavirus that causes the Middle East respiratory syndrome. There's SARS-CoV that causes SARS, which was a previous coronavirus that came and caused serious respiratory illnesses. And then the latest one is SARS-CoV-2. So that's the novel coronavirus that causes what we now call COVID-19. All right, and so COVID-19 is actually the disease caused by the coronavirus. And this coronavirus in humans first originated in Wuhan, China in late 2019 was when we first started hearing about it. And then, as you know, it's been spreading basically to a lot of different countries. So we will learn more about this in future lessons. Okay, but I hope that gave you a little bit of an overview of what viruses are, what the different types are. So you may have heard some of those different shapes and whether it's DNA and RNA, and then just a little bit about what the coronavirus is. Okay? All right, take notes on all that, add it to your notebook, and we will move on tomorrow. Thank you.